Imagine a fortress so feared that the world called it the Gibraltar of the East. A fortress built at the edge of an empire that believed it could never fall. That fortress was Singapore, and during World War II, it became the pivot of some of the most dramatic shifts in Asia. But why was Singapore so important? Today, we'll dive into the reasons, geography, strategy, economy, and human drama that made Singapore a prize worth fighting for, and a loss that echoed far beyond its shores. One location, location, location. Singapore's importance during World War II began with one simple fact: its location. Perched at the southernmost tip of the Malay Peninsula, Singapore sat like a gatekeeper between two of the world's most vital waterways, the Indian Ocean and the Pacific. Every ship traveling between Europe, the Middle East, India, and East Asia had to pass through this narrow stretch of sea known as the Straits of Malacca. This made Singapore not only a trading crossroads, but also a natural military outpost. To the British Empire, which ruled vast territories across Asia, Singapore was more than just a colony, it was the crown jewel of their Eastern defense network. The British believed that whoever controlled Singapore controlled the lifeline of their empire in Asia. In the 1920s, they built one of the largest and most advanced naval bases in the world there, equipped with massive dry docks, oil storage tanks, and coastal artillery. This became the heart of the so-called Singapore strategy, a plan to send a powerful British fleet from Europe to defend Asia in the event of war. But geography cuts both ways. Singapore's same position that made it a strength also made it a target. To Japan, which sought to dominate Southeast Asia and secure vital resources like oil and rubber, capturing Singapore meant cutting off Britain's influence and securing control over critical trade routes. Whoever ruled Singapore could choke or protect the flow of goods, troops, and supplies across the region. In essence, Singapore was never just an island, it was the keyhole of the East, the small but strategic point through which global power and commerce turned. Its fall would reshape not only the map of Asia, but the destiny of empires. A stronghold, and why it fell: Singapore was supposed to be the fortress that would never fall. The British had poured years of planning and millions of pounds into building what they believed was an impregnable stronghold, a symbol of imperial power and confidence in Asia. Massive coastal guns lined the shores, submarine pens and deep-water docks filled the naval base, and soldiers from Britain, Australia, and India were stationed there to guard it. To London, Singapore was the Gibraltar of the East, a fortress meant to deter any enemy daring enough to challenge the British Empire. But when war came to Asia, reality shattered illusion. In February 1942, the fortress collapsed in just 1 week of fighting. 85,000 Allied troops surrendered to 35,000 Japanese soldiers, marking one of the greatest defeats in British military history. So how did such a powerful fortress fall so fast? The failure lay in misplaced confidence and poor preparation. The British had designed Singapore's defenses to face the sea expecting a naval assault, but the Japanese, led by General Yamashita, attacked from the north, advancing through the dense jungles of Malaya, a route the British thought impassable. With lightning speed, they swept down the peninsula, using bicycles, tanks, and relentless air attacks to outflank and exhaust Allied forces. When the Japanese finally crossed the Johor Strait into Singapore, the city's lifelines were already crumbling. Fuel, food, and water were running out, and morale was collapsing. Despite their numbers, the defenders were cornered and unprepared. On February 15, 1942, Singapore fell. Its surrender was more than a military defeat, it was a psychological earthquake. The myth of British invincibility in Asia was destroyed overnight, and the world saw the shifting of power from west to east. Singapore's fall wasn't just the loss of a fortress, it was the fall of an empire's pride. 3. Economic and strategic value. Singapore's value in World War II went far beyond its military defenses. It was also one of the most strategic and economically powerful ports in all of Asia. Its deep water harbor, capable of handling the largest warships and merchant vessels of the time, made it an essential base for refueling, repairing, and resupplying naval fleets. Whoever controlled Singapore could project military power across the South China Sea, Indian Ocean, and Pacific, a rare advantage in a region dotted with smaller, less developed ports. Economically, Singapore was the heartbeat of Southeast Asian trade. It connected the rich resource zones of Malaya, Indonesia, and Borneo, full of rubber, tin, oil, and palm, with the rest of the world. Ships carrying vital wartime materials passed through its docks daily. To the British, losing Singapore meant cutting off one of the empire's most valuable economic arteries. For Japan, the island represented something even greater, a key to empire. Capturing Singapore opened the gateway to the entire Malay archipelago and allowed Japan to secure access to the oil fields of Indonesia and the raw materials needed for its war machine. It also fulfilled the dream of the Greater East Asia Co-Prosperity Sphere, a vision of Japanese dominance over Asia, free from Western control. Thus, Singapore's importance was not just defensive, it was offensive and transformative. Control of the island meant control of sea routes, resources, and influence. In the grand chessboard of World War II, Singapore was not a pawn, it was a queen, and whoever held it could change the balance of power in Asia. 4. Symbolism and morale. The fall of Singapore wasn't just a military defeat, it was a symbolic earthquake that shook the foundations of the British Empire and forever changed how Asia saw colonial power. When the news broke on February 15, 1942, British Prime Minister Winston Churchill called it the worst disaster and largest capitulation in British history. To the world, the unthinkable had happened. The mighty British Empire, ruler of the seas and symbol of Western dominance, had surrendered to a smaller Asian nation in just days. For centuries, the British Empire had built its reputation on being untouchable. Singapore was supposed to embody that confidence, a fortress of strength, wealth, and control. But when it fell, the illusion crumbled. Across Asia, people began to question everything they had been taught about European superiority. The myth of white invincibility was broken, and suddenly the idea of independence didn't seem impossible. From India to Indonesia, nationalist movements found new fire, inspired by the sight of the British flag lowered in humiliation. For Japan, the victory was more than military, it was psychological. Capturing Singapore sent a clear message. Asia could defeat the West. Japanese propaganda hailed it as proof that Asian nations could stand on their own without European domination. The city was renamed Syonan-to, meaning Light of the South, symbolizing Japan's self-proclaimed role as Asia's liberator. So Singapore's fall wasn't just about soldiers and strategy. It was about shifting power and perception. It changed how millions saw the world. It marked the beginning of the end for colonial empires and the dawn of a new era, one where Asia's destiny would no longer be written by outsiders. 5. Human cost and legacy. Behind the battle lines and grand strategies, the story of Singapore during World War II is ultimately one of human pain, courage, and rebirth. When the British surrendered in February 1942, the city's nightmare had only just begun. For the next 3.5 years, Singapore fell under Japanese occupation and was renamed Syonan-to, meaning Light of the South. But for those who lived through it, that light was a time of darkness and terror. The Japanese occupation brought brutality and fear to daily life. Thousands of civilians, especially those of Chinese descent, were rounded up during the Sukching massacre, accused of being anti-Japanese or loyal to China. Many were executed in mass shootings along beaches and fields. Food was scarce, inflation skyrocketed, and people survived on rations and fear. Allied prisoners of war, including British, Australian, and Indian soldiers, were forced into hard labor on railways and camps under horrific conditions. Thousands never made it home, but amid the suffering, something else was born. A new awareness. The fall of Singapore made people realize that the British Empire was not invincible, and that Singapore's fate should never again depend on foreign powers. It sowed the first seeds of national identity, unity, and self-reliance. After the war, this spirit would grow stronger, leading to movements for self-governance and independence. So when we speak of Singapore's importance in WWII, we cannot just measure it in military terms. We must remember the human cost, the families torn apart, the lives lost, and the resilience of a people who endured and rose again. Out of tragedy came strength. Out of occupation came a new nation, determined never to fall so helplessly again. 6. Why it still matters today. More than 80 years later, the story of Singapore during World War II still matters. Not as a distant memory, but as a timeless lesson in strategy, resilience, and nationhood. The fall of Singapore remains one of the most studied military events in the world, precisely because it revealed how overconfidence, poor planning, and underestimation of the enemy can destroy even the strongest fortress. Modern defense planners still cite it as a case study in what happens when leaders prepare for the wrong kind of war, guarding the seas while the real danger advances through the jungle. But the legacy goes far beyond military strategy. For many Southeast Asian nations, the events of 1942 became a turning point in history. The collapse of the British Empire's invincible stronghold shattered the illusion of colonial superiority and inspired new movements for freedom. In the years that followed, countries across Asia began to rise, seeking independence, self-rule, and national pride. Singapore, too, began its journey toward becoming the strong, self-reliant nation we see today. And then there is memory, the emotional weight that still lingers. Across Singapore, museums like the Battle Box, reflections at Bukit Chandu, and the Kranji War Memorial serve as living reminders of courage, loss, and endurance. Each story told, there echoes one message: never take peace or safety for granted. So when we ask, why was Singapore so important in World War II? The answer stretches across generations. It mattered because it was a crossroads of empires, a test of human spirit, and a lesson written in both triumph and tragedy. Singapore's story reminds us that strength isn't just about fortresses or fleets. It's about foresight, unity, and the will to rise again. 7. Summary. 1 fast recap. Let's bring it all together with a quick, clear recap. The essence of why Singapore mattered so much during World War II. 1. Geography and gateway. Singapore's position at the tip of the Malay Peninsula made it one of the most strategic naval and trade crossroads in the world. Whoever controlled it could control the vital shipping lanes between the Indian Ocean and the Pacific. 2. Stronghold myth and fall. The British believed Singapore was an unbreakable fortress, but it wasn't. Poor planning, overconfidence, and the Japanese army's speed and tactics led to one of Britain's greatest military defeats. 3. Economic and strategic value. Beyond its fortress walls, Singapore was an economic powerhouse. Its port, resources, and location made it the key to Southeast Asia's trade and military movement. For Japan, conquering it meant securing dominance over Asia's wealth and supply routes. 4. Symbolism and morale. Its fall shattered the illusion of Western superiority and inspired independence movements across Asia. For Japan, it was a symbolic victory, proof that the West could be defeated in the East. 5. Human stories and legacy. The occupation brought immense suffering, but it also awakened a new sense of unity and purpose among Singaporeans, a spark that would later lead to self-governance and independence. 6. Modern relevance. The lessons of Singapore still guide military and political thought today. Never underestimate your enemy, never assume safety, and always learn from the past. In short, Singapore's story is not just about war, it's about power, people, pride, and the resilience that rebuilt a nation from the ashes. Conclusion. So the next time you fly into Changi Airport or gaze at Singapore's glittering skyline, remember, this land once shook the world. It was more than a port, more than an island. It was the heartbeat of an empire, the fortress that was never supposed to fall, but did. And when it did, it changed the course of history forever. From the ashes of that fall rose a city that refused to stay broken, a nation that learned to stand on its own, stronger than ever before. Singapore today shines as a symbol of resilience, strategy, and rebirth. But here's something to think about. In our modern world of shifting power and technology, what are the new Singapores? The strongholds we believe can never fall until they do? Could history repeat itself somewhere else? Tell us your thoughts in the comments below. Which place today do you think could be the Singapore of tomorrow? If you found this story fascinating, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, because history isn't just about the past. It's about the lessons we carry into the future. Until next time, thank you for watching, and as the Singaporeans say, Majula Singapura, Onward, Singapore.